Go.
Hello, everybody. Sorry we can't be with you in the Blue Limassol Forum and also to meet our Frederick University future colleagues. My name is Rachelle Alterman, and I'm here with my colleague Sigal Pelach. We're going to report on our new book called Regulating Coastal Zones, and we offer an international perspective for the first time. Let me say a word about Sigal. I'm from the Technion. Sigal is a PhD student at the Technion, but Sigal is also affiliated with Haifa University Maritime Policy and Strategy Research Center. And thanks to the Research Center, our book will be available in a few days' time, open access. That took a hefty bit of money put up by the Maritime Research Center. And so you can all access it for free in a few days' time. What is our book about, and why do we think that we've got a major contribution to international knowledge? And that is because we're dealing with land property, and most books about coastal zone regulation deal with environmental issues. That's not our specialization. The property, the land regulation, land management issues are actually ignored. If they're addressed, they're only addressed normatively, what should be, but not what is. And our book focuses on the difficulties that land poses, and the accomplishments and the impediments, the stumbling blocks. Plus, we take the first ever international comparative perspective of many countries, 15 of them, in order to see what really happens there. And we also try to create scales that compare them very, very systematically. Our team in this book, including scholars, best scholars from each of the 15 countries, and we worked with a very systematic template together with each of the teams so that the book is very rigorously comparative. Let's look to see what our countries are, who are our countries. We have three sets of countries in terms of the applicability of international law pertaining to coast. But I should first say that all our countries are members of the OECD. That means that they're all advanced economies and democratic. And it was important for us. We're not looking at developing countries where issues of law and governance are always a problem. Obviously, we're looking at countries where we could expect that the governance, the laws of the governments could be effective, and we see that it's not easy to control the coast. There are two international norms that are unique for our set of countries, or most of them. On the right hand, we have two countries, Australia and the USA, where no international norm about coastal regulation exists. Note that we're dealing only with the coast, not with the maritime issues. So we're not looking at sea regulation, international or national. And then two sets of countries have some international norm applicable to them. Let's first look at the middle one, the Mediterranean, where the Mediterranean Integrated Coastal Zone Management Protocol applies. It's called the Barcelona Convention. It is international law, for better or for worse. From 2008, all Mediterranean countries could sign it. Of the 22 Mediterranean countries, only 7 have not signed it. And note, Cyprus is among them, not signed. In our set of countries, the only country that is not signed is Turkey, and most of the other countries have also ratified, that have made it part of domestic law. Although, let's hint already that we did not see much direct impact of this international law. So there are, though, national norms, and this is what we were looking at: national laws, norms, plans, etc. There are also many EU members in our group. In fact, all but 4, that is 11 countries, are EU members. And EU members that are Mediterranean, they have both the international law, the Mediterranean Iccm protocol that binds them, if they've signed it. And the EU members that are not in the Mediterranean, they're also under an international EU norm a supranational EU norm, which is not actually legislation. It's a recommendation of the European Parliament about ICZM on the land part of the coast. The marine part, as I think you know, is a directive, but the land part is only soft law. It's only a policy statement. Our book looks at parameters of integrated coastal zone management. These are common parameters. People discuss them in books and articles and policy documents. And we shall go through them as much as time permits here in this presentation. The book actually expounds on all of them, and you're very welcome to look at each country, plus to look at our 100 pages of comparative analysis done by Sigal and me. So the first, before we go into the parameters, we also developed an index, which is really an index of feasibility in terms of existing pressure on the coast. We don't have Cyprus here, but you're invited and welcome to calculate your Cyprus index. The index is composed of the population density within 10 kilometers of the coast, persons per kilometer, and the percentage of population living within these 10 kilometers. You see that Malta, because it's 100%, 10 kilometers is 100 in the percentage, and its score is also the highest. However, Israel, because of its small land size and high population growth, it is very close to Malta and will soon overtake it because of our much higher population fertility rate. Look at the other countries and you can say that they vary enormously in terms of pressure. Pressure means feasibility. Pressure means there are infrastructure, hotels, homes, hospitals, cities along there, so it's less easy. It's harder to implement new regulations. So let's see what the countries have accomplished vis-a-vis that index. Now I pass the microphone, the Zoom, on to my colleague Sigal, who is really the expert in the technical calculations, everything else, of course, but especially the technical one. Sigal.
Thanks, Rachel. So the idea of coastal public land ownership for management or for allowing access, so on, is actually an ancient Roman one. And we see that all the countries in our sample have some kind of coastal land ownership, but we do know that there are countries in the world that don't have any. But the thing is that while all the countries have it up to what's underwater, they define what is underwater differently. And then some countries also go beyond the land that's underwater. So we have different shoreline definitions. We have Spain, which doesn't use the shoreline definitions. It uses the definition that's more geomorphology, and it says up to some of the sand dunes. And on the other end of the scale, we have the UK and USA, which say mean low water. Only up to the mean low water is publicly owned. So that means that has implications for various aspects of particularly access, but also for the setbacks, as Rachel will turn to next.
Yes, a lot of implications of public land, and we see that the word public land is used a lot, but where is it? And we had to Sigal had to go into a lot of details to calculate this, to make this graph possible. Now, beyond that, there is a norm. Public land is often ancient, but or long-standing public ownership, but the coastal setback is not ancient. Coastal setback means that a particular section of the public land or private land, could be either, beyond the shoreline, is protected from construction, cannot be built. Now here comes in this international protocol, the Barcelona ICZM protocol. It says in hard legal language and gives a number, by the way, only on this issue. The other stuff is kind of norms, quite flexible. And it says there should be a setback zone 100 meters, not necessarily public, but it could be private land, but no construction for 100 meters. The question that we asked along our 15 countries, whether they have this kind of norm. The Mediterranean ones are ostensibly obliged by it, and Cyprus, if it signs, is also obliged by it. But we see that this obligation it depends on local will in the final analysis. And you see that 4 Mediterranean countries do not have this setback. This graph shows what you saw before, the shoreline reference line, plus the setback. This required a lot of study. And you see that these 4 countries do not reach the 100. Now, the question is whether the other countries were influenced by this protocol, the other Mediterranean countries, and the answer is no, except for Israel, because these coastal setbacks were there before, such as in France and in Spain. In Israel, they actually were inspired by the Barcelona Protocol, and even before it was signed, this was implemented, although it's not fully implemented because there are older property rights, but in terms of new property rights and development rights, not allowed and strictly protected in our very dense coast. So another topic that we actually developed into a full paper, we broadened this a lot because this touches on people and the right of getting to the coast and actually enjoying it. It's almost a human right. This is the question of right of public access. You can see the citation. If you put our names and the journal Sustainability, this should be posted free of charge, open access in the journal Sustainability. There we develop, in the book and there even more, we develop 5 categories of accessibility, which you are invited to assess in your own country in Cyprus: horizontal along the coast, vertical to the shore. That's not easy to implement because that requires often going through private land at some points and being able to get to the shoreline in general or in specific points. And then access to sea view, that requires planning and urban design questions. And yes, there are some countries, a few only, that do protect this in legislation or in statutory plans. Accessibility for people with disabilities in our group, only 2 countries have this in general legislation. And this is quite ambitious because people with disabilities require public works to change the actual point, the actual beach, and that conflicts with environment. It's a very interesting legal issues. And then social justice in accessibility. So this is interesting. You can read on it and do your own assessment in the public and private groups in Cyprus. Another of our dimensions is land use planning. And here we're not referring to the general land use planning. All the countries, including Cyprus, have a general land use planning, zoning, spatial planning, whatever you call it, territorial planning. We're talking about a special kind of tool or institution or regulation or law for the coastal protection planning and so on. And the winners in this one are France and Israel. France has a special body, national body, and special regulatory legal tools beyond the setback zone and special dedicated plans. So does Israel, a relatively new, strong body, 2004. You see that in the US, the only state that comes a bit close to something like that is California. And many of the US states, the regulatory protection of the coast is quite weak. In Spain, we see that there is quite a bit there, and yet I leave it for you to read up. Climate change. This was the most disappointing parameter among our book analysis, comparative analysis. 4 minutes, great. So this time I will actually be on time. Climate change, everybody falls short. This was before the Glasgow conference, but it's recent years, last 2 years or so, and actual preparation for sea level rise is weak. Properties along the beaches or close to them. Some countries though do better job, and some countries less. You can see these scale we developed, but even in number one, we can't say that this is what climate change preparation needs to be along coastal areas. So the good countries are ones that you would expect. And then we have some countries that are going in that direction, Australia, Israel. Some bit of change in policy, Greece, Italy, and Portugal. No reference to climate change, Malta, Slovenia, and Turkey. And then in the US, some states going backwards. And public participation, the only thing I can say here, this time frame, is to say that what we found is the most important thing is not the access to the right to participate in planning processes or regulation, but the coalitions between non-government groups and the courts. And we have Netherlands, Israel, and Spain that made huge achievements through these kinds of coalitions where court decisions have changed reality on the ground in protection. In Spain, because of their achievement in protecting so much beach, they actually had to kick out from property rights thousands of Spanish residents, many of them poor, some foreign owners, and there are also some protests in the other direction. So achievements with property can sometimes fire back to some extent. It's not easy to make achievements on the ground with property. Integration and coordination, it's always not enough because the seashore, the coastal areas, we all know here in this forum that there's lots of conflicts and it's very difficult to integrate and to coordinate government issues and different specializations along the coast. So everything falls short of it, although there are differences in degrees. And my favorite topic, I'm not sure it's Sigal's favorite topic because she's of Australian origin. And as you can see, the degree of compliance with planning regulations in Australia is high level compliance. They don't really know much about illegal construction along the coast or illegal use for hotels or for restaurants. And I think that in Cyprus and Israel, we do know some of that. And then we have the second category is countries that have made significant improvements in enforcement, and that is Israel, Spain, and Slovenia that's come back from Soviet times, we all know now. And there was a lot of illegal, they're making progress on that. And occasional cases go to court in Malta and Portugal, and high levels of non-compliance, Greece, Italy, and Turkey. Here's a picture of a very famous or notorious, totally illegal Spanish hotel with lots of demolition orders and court cases for 20 years. I'm not sure whether it's finally down, but if so, it's very recently down. And this is my final transparency. On the left is Portugal. These towers were legal, but they are dangerous, and there are demolition orders since 2002. It's dangerous to live there. I've visited there. These are my pictures. And enforcement is difficult. Enforcement is not easy. It's not easy for the city of Limassol. It's not easy for any area because it's political, it's economic, it's social. But these are the conflicts along the coastal areas. On the right is a cultural issue, and I wonder what you Cypriots would say about that. I bet you this exists along a lot of Mediterranean or especially Middle Eastern countries. This is Israel. The coast is very highly protected and access rights are protected. It's illegal to build these kinds of things overnight. And you see here a huge tent, and within it, small tents for the night. In this tent, there's a fridge, there's an oven, and people of all social groups like to use this from time to time and stay overnight. It is not legal, and I'm wondering myself whether this might be over-regulation to kick it out. So that's for discussion. Thank you very much. Efcharisto, Toda, and Sigal.
Thank you.